Okay, in step one, what you need to do is cover your canvas or paper or wood with black paint. So that is the first step. If you are fortunate enough, you can find black canvas that's already ready to go, if you prefer. I actually like the look of the paint better, so I'm going to paint my wood canvas here, my wood plaque canvas, completely black. Okay, on to step two. For this step, what you're going to want is a nice bright blue. So I've got this Indian turquoise. I could use that. I think I'm going to go with green tones today. So I've chosen this one, which is kind of a minty blue. It's called Sea Breeze. But you can pick whichever kind of bright blue-green that you like. And in this step, what we're going to do is use a sponge. I found a round sponge and I just cut it into pieces. If you got a natural sponge, that's the best option. I couldn't find one of those, so I've got a synthetic sponge made to look like a natural sponge, and that's okay. And what I'm going to do is, this is where we're going to kind of set the stage for the background. Basically, we're going to decide what the galaxy is going to look like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip my sponge into the paint and then offload it a bit onto the plate. I don't want it to be too wet. And then what I want here is kind of a wave. So I'm going to lightly just tap. When we're talking about making a galaxy, it's your preference. So if you don't want this shape, that's fine. You can do any shape on your background. You could go vertical, you could go completely horizontal, you could go diagonally. I just kind of decided on this goofy shape here. And what I'm going to do is tap, tap, tap that color and blend it out. I don't want to use a lot of paint. I'm just going for the shape here, and I'm going to blend it around over and over. Your arm might get tired, but stick with it. Keep blending. Alright, I am satisfied with this. Now the next step is going to be using a dark color to kind of blend this into the backgrounds a little bit. I'm going to use kind of a pine green. This is called Black Forest Green. And I'm going to do the same thing, except this time, and I'm not even really, I don't need to wet my sponge. I'm just going to tap it off as much as I can. I'm going to squeeze it so that the surface of the sponge is pretty small, okay? And what I'm going to do is dip into this deep green, offload it a little bit so that it's not real heavy, and I'm going to go around the edges here. And I'm going to kind of blend in this green and the black. So what I want to do is kind of just create a medium shade in between the bright color and the black. So if you need to, tap in your paint, offload it, and then just keep on going. And then blend it out. And you want to do this on all sides. So I'm tapping the color on, and then I'm turning the sponge a bit so that part of it is an empty sponge and part of it has that color. And then I'm just kind of mixing it into the black. Mix, mix, mix. That's the key. Mix and blend. I'm using a wood panel, so it makes lots of noise. So I've completely done the outside. Now I just want to do a little bit on the inside. Not much, but just enough to show that there's some variation. Blend it out kind of to your preference. Alright, now as you can see, some of this moved into my black a little bit, and that's where the next part comes in. So step 2 is our greens. Using black is just going to kind of help us refine this green. So I'm just going to turn my sponge to a clean side. I'm going to get a little black, and I'm going to tap some of this black over the edge of that green to encourage that to blend into the background a little bit. So this is where if you put too much, you can kind of take some off. Oops. Just work these colors in. There's no right or wrong. This is kind of our very own made up Milky Way, or made up galaxy in the sky. Now I only need to do this black around the outer edge, because for the most part we're going to fill in this middle. Alright, that's it for step 2. We've done our first layer, we've set our shape and added our green. So you can touch that up a little bit as you please, and then we will move on to step 3. Okay, and step 3 is where we're going to add in some yellows, okay? So what we're going to need for this is a nice buttery yellow. This is lemon yellow, and then a nice bright primary yellow. This is actually called primary yellow, and then some white as well. So in these 3 colors, we're going to do the inside of our shape, again using a stamp, or I'm sorry, using a sponge as a stamp. We're going to start with our buttery lemon yellow, and I'm going to go right around the inside edge. And my shape is getting kind of small, so I can fill that in. That's not a huge big deal. So I'm going to get my paint tapped in there. I want my sponge nice and dry, and then I can kind of blend it a little bit. If you need to squeeze your sponge so that the surface area is smaller, you just kind of want to blend that out into what was that dark green. Okay, and then I'm going to go back in with this primary yellow, dipping some on, offloading it a little bit, so that just means tapping it off, and then I'm going to go kind of a line right down the middle here, blending that in, and then cleaning my sponge off. And then for the last part, I'm just going to get a little bit of white, and I'm going to add the white, which would be like the brightest part in here. In. I'm going to turn my sponge, and then I'm going to just blend it a little bit. Now with the white, I'm going to go back and just add more and more touches right down the middle. I want the center of this to be the brightest. So and while we've got the white out, what I'm going to do is kind of clean off my sponge a little bit here. Doesn't have to be perfectly clean. You'll notice I'm not dipping my sponge into water at all. I'm just using paint and sponge, okay? And now what I'm going to do is add just a little bit of white. Again, offload it. And then I kind of want to add just some wispy little clouds. You know, like some galaxy clouds in here. Just by tapping ever so gently with barely any paint. And so now we've got the brightness that we were looking for in our galaxy. So that is it for step 4. Okay, just to review, step 3 was to add in the yellows, step 4 was to add in the white, and now we are going to continue with the white, and this is the fun part. We're going to get a toothbrush, and we are going to create lots and lots of stars. So what you want to do is dip your toothbrush in your water and pull out a little bit of your white paint. So my toothbrush is nice and wet, and what we're going to do, before I do it on the board, I'll show you how to do it. So you would hold your paintbrush, and you're going to pull your finger across your paintbrush while you're holding it above your painting, okay? So just pull it, and it's going to splatter. And my first splatters I want to do kind of over the area that I painted. Oop, got a big one right there. Careful if your paintbrush is drippy. Lots of drips. So I'm focusing on, oh my gosh, so many drips. I'm focusing on my galaxy, but I'm also letting it go around. If you get drips like this, just get a paper towel. You can wipe them up. We can fix that with a little bit of black. That just means I added too much water. The beauty of this is anywhere it's on your galaxy, you can just kind of tap it in, really. Just to show you that even artists who paint all the time have mistakes. I'm just using my finger and tapping in a little bit of black where I had those spots. And then all I have to do is just add a little more of that galaxy stars. You can add as many or as little as you would like. I named this lesson Colorado Skies, so I like to think that you can see all the stars and all the galaxies on a beautiful clear night. And then once I have those, what I'm going to do is just get some white paint, some nice thick white paint. Not going to thin it out at all. I'm going to grab a paintbrush. I'm just going to use the wrong end of the paintbrush. I'm going to dip it in, and I might add a few larger stars just by tapping my brush. Now that was step 5, my favorite step. What you want to do is let this dry completely, and then we're going to come back in and add some mountains. Okay, now for step 6, what we're going to do is add in some mountains. So you've got a few tracers available that you can choose, or you can just draw your own. And what I'm going to do is just kind of cut around this outline here. Again, I'm not being too perfect because I just drew this mountain skyline. I didn't base it off any real place. If you live by the mountains, that would be kind of a cool thing to find your, maybe a picture of your mountain skyline and draw it on. What I'm going to do, so I cut that out, and you can use either one, and as you can see, it doesn't completely go across my image, and that's okay with me. I'm going to find out where I like it, and then I'm just going to trace it. And where the outline stops, you can either just move your tracer over a bit, and line it up like this. And then add it on, or you can just draw it, whichever you prefer. And I did it with pencil, so I can barely see it, but I can see it. Let's see if I can get it up there on the camera. So it is visible for me. And all I'm going to do in this step is take some black, and I am going to paint the entire bottom of my painting black. Oops, looks like I'm out of black. Grab a new one. Oops. For this step, we are going to use black with a smidge of white. So first, what I'm going to do is just paint in my black using the same paintbrush I had earlier. So I don't even need to clean it off completely. And I'm just going to follow the shape that I drew with my mountains. All the way across. I'm not trying to be too perfect with it. I'm just making sure I cover up those pencil lines. And then I'm pulling the black paint down. Now there are two ways you can do this. If you wanted it to look kind of like a floating mountain galaxy, you could just pull that paint down and leave some of the stars at the bottom. I think that's a very pretty and cool look. Or you can continue the paint all the way down to the bottom, which is also beautiful. since I have the black paint on here for the mountains, I'm just going to add a few little wisps of white in there just to add a little bit of depth. So my paint down here, my black paint is still wet, and what I'm going to do is just take the corner of my paintbrush, dip it in. As you can see, it's just very little paint, very little white, and then I'm just going to kind of wisp it in the mountains like this, kind of just following the shape of those mountains. And then I'm going to come back and just blend it, and it's mostly going to blend in, but your eye is still going to see that shading. And you can do as much or as little of this as you'd like. You can make it as obvious or as delicate as you want. And that is the last and final step. All you need to do now, if you choose to, is add your signature, and if you like to use glaze or varnish, you can do it after it's completely dry. So that's it for the Colorado Skies galaxy painting, and so you can finish up, and then I do have another version of this using some pinks and purples if you prefer that. So I hope you join me for the second part. Okay, I'm going to start my second piece using the same first few steps. It's actually all the same steps. I'm just going to use different colors as I work. So first thing I need to do is make my background black. Okay, so I'm going to start with a set of purples. I've got here lavender and dioxazine purple, and I'm going to start with my lavender here. Just like I did with my bright blue, I'm going to use this lavender, dip it in, offload it a little bit by tapping, and this is where I'm going to design the shape in the background. So last time I did kind of a wave shape. This time I think I'm just going to go for kind of a football shaped diagonal maybe. So alright, so I've got a lot of paint on there. I need to kind of blend this out. Don't forget, just like in the first lesson, we can get rid of some of this paint with black if you need to. So feel free to experiment a little bit with your shape. We can always add paint, so I try to go kind of light when I start and add a little more and a little more until it gets where I want it to be. Trying to do as I blend it out is just trying to have some variation in the shades of this color. Alright, so once you get it where you like it, what I'm going to do now is use my dioxazine purple, which is just a darker purple. And I'm just going to use squish this so that it's small. I'm going to get some of this. I actually might add just a smidge of black to darken it a bit. And I'm just going to blend a small area of my purple into my black. Now, as I mentioned, I added just a little bit of black to it, so I'm going to do outside edge with this nice dark purple, and then also the inside just a little bit as well. Once I get the color applied, I'm just gonna use the dry part of the sponge, clean part of the sponge, and kind of blend it into my black. So that is it for the next step. And then if you remember, what we did on the first one is we did the greens first, and then we moved into the yellows. So on this one we did the purples first, and now we're going to move into the pink. So I've got my colors here. My pinks that I'm using is Vivid Violet and Baby Pink, and then white. Okay, so the first color I'm going to use is the light pink, the baby pink here. Go ahead and put some of this violet out there too. Okay, so I'm going to grab a clean sponge or a clean portion of a sponge. I'm going to dip it in my baby pink and then offload it a bit. And then I'm going to dab here around the middle and blend it in. And as I'm working, I'm just kind of considering the shape that I'm making. I don't want it to be completely symmetrical because things just aren't that way. You know, there's a lot of variation. So I'm kind of making this top portion a little wider than the bottom. Little by little, I'm just adding it in and blending it out. Okay, and then once you're satisfied with your baby pink, go ahead and tap in some of that violet. And I'm filling in the space on the inside with this violet. Little by little, and just kind of work your way up, blending it into the baby pink. want to, you can even pull a little violet somewhere else. The key here is just to kind of make variations. This is a fun lesson. You can change it. You can experiment. You can do your own thing. And then the third part of this step is just to add some white where you want the brightest part to be. And you can experiment with the colors a little bit. On the last lesson I added a little bit of kind of star clouds in there. I add some kind of going across here. If you feel like your violet is too blended in, you can add some violet back in. Play a little bit, experiment. This is all meant to be fun. Even if you're froggy, add a little bit of that purple back in. At this point, I'm just adding colors, seeing what happens. Then remember, if there's any part that you are just not satisfied with, like I feel like where I put my clouds, it's just too cloudy. So I'm going to add a little bit of black in there and kind of break that up. So I'm satisfied with my galaxy here, and the next step after you are done with the sponging is to get out your your toothbrush, your art toothbrush, and you want to get some white. Mix the white with a little bit of water. You don't need a whole lot of water. You don't want it to be too loose. If you saw me in the first part, I made it a little bit too wet, and so it got too drippy for my taste. So I wouldn't even do 50-50. I would just dip it into the water and then use whatever it picks up, okay? So again, we're just gonna take this paintbrush, or take this toothbrush, and then turn it sideways and splatter some paint. The first splatters I'm going to make are right across the galaxy that I created, and then a little bit across the sky. And you can do as much or as little as you like. But I like to kind of add most of it around that galaxy. Okay? Across the bottom, because I am going to make this kind of a floating mountain chain, so I do want there to be some stars down here, so I'm just going to add that in a little bit down at the bottom. I just wanted a little more light down there. now that that's completed, the next step is to add in the mountain line. So you have a tracer available with a mountain pattern. Feel free to use that. What I'm going to do is just cut this baby out. You can use any mountain shapes that you want. If you feel confident in painting those freehand, you can do that as well. This is a super flexible lesson. Okay, so I've got my mountain line there, and I want it to come on this one maybe about halfway. I want my peaks to be about halfway, and then again I'm going to take a pencil and just come through and trace my mountains. All right, so once we have that done, we're going to get some more black, and for this one I am going to leave the stars at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some paint on my brush. I'm going to start at the top of the mountain peaks, and I'm just going to follow this shape with my brush. And once I get a decent amount of paint on there, I'm just going to pull down and let the brush just kind of smooth that blackness out. Now I'm just doing this maybe 1 or 2 peaks at a time. Just pulling down, and the brush will kind of fade out. By allowing that paint to just blend out into space, it gives the effect of floating mountains, which is kind of cool. So that's the effect I'm going to give this one. It's just that the mountains are kind of floating, which I super love. So that's another way that you can do this lesson. So again, this is complete. All I would need to do is sign it, varnish it, and it's ready to go. So as you can see, between both lessons here, you really can vary this quite a bit. You can vary the colors, you can vary the mountain. Oops, let me see. I'm trying to get both of these in focus here. You can vary the mountain shapes. Be creative. You could add a sun, or not a sun, you could add a moon, you could add a planet, you could add a shooting star. Make this your own. I would love, love, love to see what you create. This is one of my favorite lessons because it's so versatile. So make sure that you tag me at the Painted Cicada, either on Facebook, Insta, or Twitter at Painted Cicada, or you can send me an email of what you create. I would love to share it on my page, or you can join the Painted Cicada group on Facebook where you can interact with other artists and share your work. But I really appreciate you participating with me, and I can't wait to create with you again.